This week, we're going to explore the Messianic thought of the sectarian group, and also an aspect of the scroll material called the Temple Scroll, which echoes their Messianic hope and their eschatological viewpoint. As we explore the Messianic thought of the Old Testament world, we see that during the Old Testament, in the latter days, this concept of Messianic hope, we see that in the days of Isaiah, of course, and his Messianic hope statements, such as the child being born in chapter 7 and chapters 9 and 11. And so the development of Messianic thought in the background of the failure of kingship throughout the Old Testament world. And again, Solomon becomes, in the king's material, the exemplar of the great and faithful king who becomes most unfaithful in the latter part of his rule. And then so throughout the history of the kings, they're evaluated in terms of their faithfulness to the Torah. So Messianic hope begins to develop through the latter part of the Old Testament era and into the interbiblical period. In the post-exilic period, we have, again, they're under foreign domination. The Messianic world was to be one of deliverance and hope and freedom. And so in the backdrop of the Old Testament world and the failure of the leadership of the nation to live up to the divine ideal as set forth in the Torah, the aspect of Messianic hope began to develop further and further. So when we come into the New Testament, for example, like in John's Gospel at the beginning, the questions that are posed to John the Baptist, we see that in the way that the questions are phrased about John's identity, that there were multiple viewpoints about Messianic hope and Messianic figures in this coming eschatological age in which there would be Messianic leadership. So the theology of the era of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which echo one perspective, and of course the era leading up to the New Testament documents themselves, even when Jesus asks the disciples about his identity, what are the people saying? Who do they say that I am? You have a variety of viewpoints. Perhaps one of the prophets like Jeremiah, perhaps John the Baptist has come back to life. There are a variety of viewpoints being discussed out there in the common marketplace of ideology. At Qumran, we seem to have at least two figures, perhaps even three, if we look at the person simply called the prophet, who is described as a kind of precursor, a la John the Baptist, to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. Most scholars view that we have two separate Messianic leaders, one of the Davidic kingly royal Messianic line, and another of the Zadok priestly lineage. And so, again, kingship and high priesthood were to be kept separate according to their interpretation of the Davidic promise, 2 Samuel 7, and the Zadokite promise of the book of Ezekiel. So, in the end times, after the years of war described in the War Scroll, God would establish the kingdom upon the earth for eternity. But again, this group took quite literally Isaiah 40 and verse 3, went down by the Dead Sea to prepare to be trained for their role in the leadership of the community as faithful teachers and interpreters of the scriptures for the new generation. So in the Temple Scroll, and we look at it also during this week, we see the new temple patterned again somewhat after Ezekiel 40 through 48. This temple would be overseen by faithful priests. Through the scroll, they not only have delineations of the dimensions of the temple, but also detailed descriptions of sacrificial practices, more precisely than are described in the Torah itself, as well as various instruments and other aspects of priestly involvement in the sacrificial process. So this text gives us a variety of their own Torah interpretations, which echo their strict interpretive approach that we'll look at in the next unit.